Hello and welcome back to those joining the session on rural marketing for clean tech and agri startups. In this session, we have with us Mr. Praveen, India coordinator for Gogla. He has a vast and diverse experience in off-grid energy products, FMCG, and the telecom market. Mr. Praveen has been involved in designing and guiding companies on the go-to-market strategy and has trained sales teams on rural markets in India as well as other South Asian countries. In today's masterclass, he will be focusing on the rural distribution channel, awareness creation drive, and will touch upon consumer financing as well. Over to you, Mr. Praveen.
Thank you so much, Mathili. Thank you. A big thanks to Wilgrow Innovation Foundation, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of Unconvention 2021. And of course, thanks for the introduction. So let's start, participants, by kind of breaking the ice from my side, and I would like to keep it really informal, and hence I would I would encourage the participants who are listening to me to keep asking questions through the chat box, and I'll try to answer them as we go along. Preferably for every 15 minutes slot that I have divided my talk and this masterclass into three compartments, and for each compartment I have allotted around 15 minutes. So I would expect that after every 15 minutes, after one particular segment is over, if there are questions, I can take them up. If there could be comments, there could be anything that you'd like to tell me. I mean, so let's keep it open like that. Let's not save everything for the end, because we might both lose track as to what we wanted to talk about. Okay, so namaste to all of you, and as I said, thanks to Wilgrow. Now we are here doing the masterclass. Actually, this term masterclass, although it's being used professionally now in these kind of webinars, I would say, but it kind of reminds you of your classroom and your school and your college days. And I remember, how boring that really becomes when you start thinking of it as a class where a master is trying to tell you what he knows, and you probably don't know that much, which is not true. I truly believe that all of you all who are participating here, whether it's a clean tech or an agri-tech startup, or even if it's a company which has been there for some time, I know all of you are experienced enough, so you know what goes on there, and I can just guide you or give a few tips, suggestions, but mostly I'll try and kind of tell you stories from my life on all the three segments which I have been through. It's kind of a recitation of the journey that I have been through. So very quickly, as I was already introduced, I am now representing Gogla in this session, but previously I have got approximately 20 years of work experience in the corporate corporate Indian blue chip companies, for example, with the kind of Godrej's and Tatas, and I was heading the rural business for Tata Teleservices earlier, etc. And then, of course, I got into the development world. I am working with International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, as a consultant on a lighting Asia India program, as we call it, which is actually a solar lighting program. And then I'm also now coordinating the work for Gogla, which is actually the Global Off-Grid Energy Association, kind of a industry association, which is global, and it works for the energy sector. It is based out of Netherlands, and we have got around 180 odd members across the globe. It's a not-for-profit organization, and we try and support companies of various sizes. It could be a startup, it could be a slightly larger company, to scale up. And whatever we can do best in the marketplace, trying to support their efforts, that's what we do. So here I am representing Gogla and talking to you today. But as I said, it will be more like an informal session where I'll share with you whatever I have seen in my journey for so many years of my work life. Also, the first segment that I'm going to be talking now, that about 3 to 4 slides, are more about the startups. Now, I know it's like, preaching to the choir, and you all are representing that segment, so you probably know much more than I know. But I have kept it as the first segment just to break ice, to talk to you about something which you know more probably, so that we are on the same level playing field. And from there we go on to 2 more topics, which are about awareness creation and the importance of it, and distribution. And those are the 2 topics where I can spend as much time as I as I want, because that's where I have been spending most of my working life in. But as I said, I will start with a little bit on the startups. Also, I have been a little smart in designing this because, all of you or anyone who listens to these kind of classes or sessions sort of sometimes thinks that, what, I also know a little bit about that. So what are you trying to tell me about distribution or awareness? And I have done that, because some of you and many of you would have been part of larger companies, maybe the corporate world, etc., and now have become, your own. You've got your own startup, etc. So what I have designed this cleverly as is that, I'll try to talk more in each segment from my life, so that those are unique experiences which only I have seen, and that's how it will be new to you. So enough of this, I would say, preamble. Now, quickly getting into the topic, and so now, as I said, the first 3 4 slides are all about the startup world that we are in now, and here the first slide talks about a few news flashes, kind of, some things which are happening around us, and what we hear about. So in January, I'm sure several of you would have seen the Prime Minister addressing the startups in that sort of conference, which is known as Praram. And he announced that there'll be 1,000 crore support for budding startups financially. And so that shows not the amount doesn't become important. What it becomes important is that the government is thinking so much and is trying to do things in this ecosystem. It was also mentioned that India is the world's third largest startup ecosystem with about 41,000 startups. Very good thing is that it's very strong on gender. So women are directors in 44% of recognized startups in India. Now that's a very, very high number, and we really should support this whole cause. There were only 4 startups in India, who were like a unicorn or kind of $1 billion club, and now there are more than 30 of them. Similarly, when I was doing some bit of work on kind of the agri-tech sector, because of some work that I'm doing with the current organization that I'm part of, we found these numbers very, very interesting. Like, $753 million funding in agri-tech sector has come in 2019. And even if you take the last few years, I think right from 2015 onwards, the kind of funding that has come into the agri-tech, for example, sector is amazing. I mean, it's upwards of several multiple million of dollars, and this continues to sort of grow. So what I'm trying to sort of talk about here is setting the context as to why we are important. As in we, I'm talking about you and me both being part of the startup world. I mean, today we are here and talking about the startup. So this is really important. This is happening, and most importantly and interestingly, I mean, if you see what happened during COVID, that several of the startups, took to the field in terms of trying to become relevant with what we can offer during COVID. They come out really strong. So instead of becoming uh, weaker or going out of business, we saw that so many startups kind of changed their models and quickly got into the field and trying to do what the current need or the requirement was. So now here again, as we see, 2018 there were 8 Indian startups unicorn, and now there are so many more. But at the same time, I mean, if you see the second point, there's also some kind of a negative, I would say, news or a point that comes forth when we talk about startups, which is that 90% of them fail in the first 5 years. Now that is really scary and something which is not desirable at all, because it's not the startup which is failing. I mean, it's kind of a whole idea that has failed. It is the effort of so many people that has failed. You might have maybe 2 people with you, or 5 people, or 50 people with you. It's all those people and their families which have failed. So it's really not sort of desirable that we have a venture or a startup which starts and then fails within 5 years or whatever number of years. Now we see here that Flipkart, 1 billion payout to the founder was inspirational, but for every Flipkart, as I just said, I mean, there are 50 startups that fail. Now, why does it happen? I mean, it's basically, I personally feel that, as it's also saying here, and this is of course something that we find all around, quoted everywhere, and you'll find it on the net, that lack of funding is probably one of the major reasons why the startups fail, and that is because there are funders who can fund, but they do not understand that what is that firm or what is that company which that startup trying to tell, what is their idea, what is the big idea which needs to be supported. So that's the kind of that sort of brings down the whole initiative, and that is where we need to be sort of careful while thinking of an idea and converting into a startup and further into a much larger play. Now, I've just quoted here, but I am sure many of you, or most of you, or all of you know, probably would have read this book Zero to One, and by Peter Thiel, and of course it's kind of a good good book or good read for people who sort of are in this category now, playing around here, because it tells you so much. And if so, some of the things that I just took out from there was, what is the engineering question, or it could be a product question. We can talk about it as a product question, that what is the product, is your product something which is new or different, or is it just incremental. So when you're talking about clean energy, for example, or the energy sector, are you doing something which has been done and you're just tweaking it a little and bringing, and you think it's a great idea, or is it actually a great product? The timing question, for example, I mean, during COVID, were you trying to play around with let's say the refrigeration sector in off grid, or were you trying to play around with something which probably was not that important, for example? And it could change with geographies, right? So we are also working a lot in Africa, for example. Now there, solar home systems and televisions were selling more because people were buying these off grid products to get entertained at home because they were sitting at home. But it doesn't mean that in India also off-grid televisions were selling, because in India, grid connectivity is much better. We require products which can go out on the field, not sit in the homes, right? So there is a difference. So what is your timing? Is your timing question right? I mean, are you answering it right? The monopoly question: are you in the market where, I mean, for example, look at the solar sector itself. I mean, there are so many product lines where so many players are playing, and each one has things or has its own advantages. So are you getting the monopoly question right? Then there's the people question. This is very, very underrated. And right from my days in the corporate world, I always believed that a right team is very, very important, and you are as good as your team. That's about it. So even if you have two people, or you're the kind of means to hire a very small staff, it still means that you go out and hire that right one person, and that one right hiring can take you places, right? So that becomes very important. Distribution, of course, we all know. I mean, we can't overemphasize the distribution question. The durability question: will the market position be defendable in 10 to 20 years into the future? So are you going to play in a market for long term, or is it just an overnight play? For example, you come, you make a quick buck and go out, which I don't think we all try and do, right? And the last, of course, the secret question is: have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see? And if you have, and then of course it answers most of the questions above, because then you can engineer it right, you can time it right, and you can have the right team to play around. So I think this is something that and these are kind of, and this is just an example. You can read so many books, so many articles, so much of literature that comes out, and it's always good to keep yourself abreast as to what's happening. So read, watch, listen more. As I believe, talk less and listen more, although I'm going to be talking for 1 hour today, but generally, be a good listener rather than a great talker. And the final slide on this particular topic for me was, there's a limit to market testing. So, I see a lot of new product ideas which keep coming out, but what really is the, time for testing? How much can you test, and when do you launch? So there's a limit to that. Tweak, don't twist, because that's really funny, because, I was associated with one startup, I think last year in some capacity. And there were two stories that I sort of bring from there. One is that some of the kind of the people who started the startup were not in India, and they were somewhere in foreign land, and somewhere probably sitting and having a cup of coffee, they realized, okay, in India there is this problem and we need to solve that. I mean, come on, you need to really understand the market and be there. So then, of course, they did what they tried to do, and they started some work here in India because they thought there is a problem and they have to solve it. And every 15 days, 1 month, I used to hear them saying from there, sitting there, that we are tweaking our model, just to do this, and this is a great tweak, and this is going to be like, it will, we are pivoting and tweaking, and all these words are sound very fancy. Probably these are trying to, I sometimes feel that you're just trying to sort of give confidence confidence to yourself, to console yourself. Oh, come on, I can still do it. And in the heart of your hearts that maybe you're not, but you use these words to try and keep yourself. Maybe it's right if it is actually right, but maybe sometimes it's overdone. So tweaking is good till it doesn't turn into twisting, right? What I mean is that you totally move off the dance floor and go somewhere else. So try and see that when you do your first math on the first piece of paper, when you sort of sit down and do your first ideation, do it right. Try to do it as right as you can. I'm sure that there's tweaking required. I'm sure that there's pivoting required, but try and do it the first time as much right. So the saying that a job that begins well is kind of job half done. So try and see that we do as much research as we want to do before we sort of launch. Start small, obviously. There's no use of spending too much capital and then getting it wrong and then starting again. And finally, yes, consumer is king, but profit is God. Because what happens is, who are giving us, their startups who are getting money from whom? From investors, from donors. Where have they got their monies? Right? They must have got it from somewhere. There is somebody who's making a profit somewhere, who's putting money into startups and to new ideas, which money sometimes, as we saw, 90% businesses don't work after 5 years, or within 5 years they collapse. So there's money going down the drain. Somebody is putting that money. Where is that money coming from? I mean, there has to be somebody who's earning a profit and is trying to put it here, trying to make more money, or whatever be the reason. It could be charity. So please, have models which do not depend too much on support for year after year after year. Your model has to have a break even someday. The sooner the better, and of course, profitability, as I said, is God. So it will only help you to getting new ideas, launch new products, go to new markets, do whatever you want. So that's really important. So till here is what sort of is the startup thing that I was talking about, and these were my, and I said the story that I shared was one startup which I said was doing a lot of tweaking. Another one also I can share is that they're of course they also I worked a lot with them, and they were trying to do a lot of work in the rural markets. They also changed, but they were not tweaking so much. It was like trying to guide slowly into a different kind of a way of working over a period of a year or two, which is totally fine, and therefore they're still there. They're doing okay, and they continue to sort of grow. So there are these two stories which I kind of wanted to share. One is, of course, there's a lot of tweaking going on, and the other one is slightly more stable. And even if the tweaking happens, it's just right for your business to see that kind of. So here I'll probably pause for a few seconds and let me know if there are any kind of any comments or anything that you would like to point out. And otherwise, we kind of move to the two more core topics for the day.
Praveen, I think we can move on because at this stage we haven't yet received any questions.
Yeah, because this was more like a okay.
It was more like an introduction, yeah.
Yeah, it's more about a discussion about where we are now. So quickly going on to the two more kind of topics that I wanted to share with you as in terms of my experience of my work life. So the awareness question. Now the awareness question is really important, and I'm just presenting a few data points here for you all to see, because we should know which kind of market are we really talking about. So India is really a very, very huge market, as we all know. It's more like a continent rather than a country. And so there are these 6 lakh plus villages that we have, and I'm talking rural now. So I'm not talking all India. I'm talking mostly rural, and because that's where it's more difficult to sort of sell or market your products. There are very few large villages, as you can see. They're mostly, the mostly villages are between, and this is slightly older data, but even now you could have around more than 200,000 villages, which are like, not more than 2,000 people total, in that village. We have more than 600 districts. And as I said, some of the data would have changed over a few years, but more or less we are there. The internet user is more like a current data. So we have about 300 million plus rural. About all in all, we have about 600, but there are 300 million plus users of internet in rural India. Hearts is somewhere, if for people who don't know what hearts are kind of these small rural markets. And like on the right, if you see the photograph of the camel and people sitting in Rajasthan, so that's kind of a Rajasthan maybe a market. But heart is somewhere which could have these fairs going on, people trying to sell, etc. And typically a heart would have about 300, 400 small shops. These are not permanent shops or permanent hearts. They keep coming and going every week. So And the mandis, of course, are again even smaller in terms of size, where people come and sell their wares in the rural parts. So this is some bit of data that I wanted to share. Now coming to the core awareness question, reach is critical, but it is difficult. So we all know that in rural India, it's very difficult to reach to all the markets. To even today, the likes of Hindustan Lever or a Coca-Cola or these kind of companies are also not present 100%, or maybe they are not happy with their presence wherever they are. So reach is very, very critical, but it is difficult because it means cost. It means so many other things. Uh, in the rural markets, it's more about a word of mouth kind of experience for people. So instead of depending too much on technology or various mediums of communication and conversation, it's also a word of mouth. So if a word spreads around an area and it's a good word about your product or service, it's really important. And why it's also important is because if a bad word of mouth spreads, then it's equally dangerous, because then to go back, like we saw in the solar lighting industry, for example, in the beginning when the products were just being brought out and probably they were not the best, and some of the places when the markets really people started rejecting some of the products, then it is difficult to go back. Then you have stickiness of rural consumers. So what you'll find in the rural markets, that and I can tell you for a fact that it is very difficult to sort of convince a rural consumer. But if you manage to convince the rural consumer, he and she is likely to stick to your product and service for a very, very long time. So it's very difficult to get in, and it's equally difficult to get out, or for them to push you out. So just keep on doing hard work, and if it pays, then it pays long term. Be sure of that. Front loading approach, why I call it, is because there is a lot of investment, and more than investment, patience required. So you might sort of comment back saying that everyone doesn't have the kind of resources, but it's what I say is, it's not only resources, it could be in terms of your time, in terms of your patience. Just like your investors would have like to have patience in you, you need to have patience in these markets, because these markets are tough to get in. So if the front loading approach is that you need to sort of wait for a long payback period. Below the line, touch and feel are more important in rural markets, because awareness. Yeah.
Some questions have started coming in. Up to you if you'd like to take it at the end of the section or in between. Just
Yeah, after this slide. After this slide. Yeah, sure. So I was just saying that below the line is important, because you need to touch and feel the product. It's not enough like it's not like a Mumbai or a Delhi where you can show it on the television and it's enough. First of all, it's a very scattered market, so it's not easy to reach people through one media, and it's very expensive. So what do you do? So below the line is one of the better ways of doing it. I'll just come to how we can do this. Cost per mile is important parameter to consider while choosing marketing. So basically what I'm trying to say is that how many views do you get, how many eyeballs, as in the advertising language people say, that if you bring out an ad on television or it is in print media, how many people got to see it? And therefore if you spend a rupee and 10 people saw it, then the cost per reach, cost per person reach is something like 10 paisa. So that's the kind of, so you need to do those kind of calculations. People are there to help you out. There are a lot of inexpensive ways of doing it. So much is now available on internet, but there are also experts who are on hire, and it's not a firm or a big ad agency that you need to work with. There are so many freelancers who can also help startups in getting there. Um, Again, to add to that, I think it's very important to select geographies and regions. So for example, when I was talking to you about the IFC program, the Lighting Asia India program, even though it was a program supported by IFC and the World Bank Group, it only went to 3 states in the last 4-5 years. And now, of course, it's running in about 5 states of India, which is, so out of those 28 states plus, the about what, 8 union territories we have now. We were only going to sort of, the program was only going to 4 states or 5 states. Because you need to go deep and make an impact. So it's not, for example, if you have a great clean energy product or an agri-tech product, unless it's something that can go via the internet, it's a digital product which is easier to distribute. If it's a physical product, you need to be sure whether you want to do it in Bihar, Odisha, UP, or Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, where you cannot go everywhere. At the same time, it will require a lot of resources. Prioritize districts and hub towns, as I just said, it's a repeat of the same point. activities in and around feeder town. This is actually a minor point which I'm trying to sort of detail into. When you're doing this activity, where should you, and complete a 360-degree approach for the selected area with distributor appointment, sub dealers, agent, etc., etc. So basically, again, coming down to the same point, that go sharp, go deep, and pick your kind of fights or battles or markets as you may, and then go and work there deep. So don't try and do, as I said, and of course it's a digital offering. Maybe it's easier to do it, but even then, there could be support required, which may not make sense to sort of go wide. And therefore, finally, what I say is start with the pilot, select your best practices, do a test run quickly, and this I'm not saying in a long run like a 5 year or 3 year. I'm just saying it could be months. So do it in 3 month period, take it to a larger area, and then probably roll out within a year or so. So that's basically the one line, sort of bottom line of this whole slide was start small, start slow, test out, and then quickly roll out. Okay. Yeah. The question, please.
They're in the chat box.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it out?
Yeah, I think it will be easier, right? Because
All right.
yeah, because
So the first question, in rural marketing, many times startups try to identify champions who can push the offerings to others in the community, similar to influencers, I suppose. What are the attributes one can look to identify these champions?
So it's very simple. You start with the KOL, as we call it, the key opinion leader. Very, very simple. If you can go and talk to the village pradhan, village heads, there are teachers out there. For women, you have these women, workers out there, the health workers. So all these kind of people who you can easily identify. We have done that in our programs in the last 4-5 years in the lighting program, and they are the easiest, the quickest ones. The sort of the low hanging fruits. So reach out to them. It could even be a teacher, right? It doesn't need to have a village pradhan because he might be a little political. So you have to be careful of politics and religion. Don't touch that. Other than that, you can go and pick these. Yeah.
Okay. Question number 2. What are the ethics around doing paid pilots in rural, low economic strata communities? Is it right to ask for their scarce resources to experiment with a product that could fail?
See, I mean, there are ways of doing it. I mean, it depends what are you calling as expensive, inexpensive, right? Generally, we say that, if there is something which they can pay with about a month to 2 months of their earning, is they're more likely to kind of invest in that. And also, if you show them the advantage of why are you going for this product rather than what you're doing, then of course they will go for it. Again, when you're talking about, if you're talking about that it could fail, then of course there's the ethical question. But then there are other ways of doing it. For example, you can do it with a group. Now there are so many self-help groups out there in rural India, and those are the best way to approach. The MFIs are doing that. What are the MFIs doing? I mean, they're all going through these, the women groups, or the mostly the groups, self-help groups are mostly women. So you can probably choose a group. It's easier for them to share the burden, and in that case, more people can try your product out or the service out. And if it fails, it's less of a loss to all of them.
All right, fair. That's it at this stage. We can proceed, and as questions come up, I'll keep you informed. We are done with about half the session, and we have 30 minutes to go.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. And so the next slide is a real time. I wanted to share with you all what has really happened on the ground. So if you see this, I call it a master stroke in awareness creation, the IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation, World Bank, Lighting Asia India program. So this campaign was actually known as Suryodaya, and what you see here, and the tagline was kind of Jindagi non-stop. And why we used to call it Jindagi non-stop was because, obviously, I mean, because of solar lights, which now also have mobile charging capabilities. And also, it's like if you use the solar home systems, you can see on the right the photograph, which is actually showing a television on the van, is all now connected. So it's Zindagi non-stop, that you can work later hours, you can study later hours at night, you can cook, you can be entertained, and therefore it's Zindagi non-stop. So basically, this campaign, as you can see it here, was a great campaign, the Suryodaya campaign. It's a registered name that that IFC uses. It went to about 33 odd districts in 2015-16 in 3 states of UP, Bihar, and Rajasthan. It did about 9,500 villages. in 33 districts and reached millions of people. I would say ATL and BTL combined. ATL as in there was some radio spots that were taken, etc. And BTL was this brand campaign that you see the photograph of. And now again, there's the second phase of that campaign, which started last year, but because of COVID, it was tweaked. The van still goes out, but there's a lot of digital now being used. So there's a lot of YouTube videos, WhatsApp groups being made, etc., and they are being used. So this is just an example which I wanted to share with you. So it's not about the cost being high or it being looking like an expensive campaign, etc. Of course, it's expensive when you do the BTL thing, but what I was trying to show you here was basically that it's a good way of doing things in rural areas because I talked about touch and feel, and this is example of this. So you can see a MC there in that kind of an orangish t-shirt who's trying to talk to people. There is a proper spiel. They spend about 2 hours in one village in the morning, second village is in the evening, and they tell and there are these companies who have become part of this campaign. They are all quality verified, kind of lighting global, international electrotechnical commission certified, IEC certified kind of products, and only they can participate. So there are products also for people to buy. And so there is on-spot sale, there is a skit that is shown, there is a game that is done. So it's basically very interactive. So people get to interact with the team and the product. They can touch and feel, and if they want, they can buy. And if they don't, then leads are collected out there and they are passed on. And then of course there's this whole bit of lead conversion, and that's also something that you can take note of, that whenever you do anything, whether it's a digital campaign, whether it's a physical campaign, a BTL campaign, you have to try and collect as many leads. Every name that you collect with a phone number or an address is important for you. As we all know, it's like, we all know, and some corporates have shown us, that is the oil of future. That's the kind of wealth for future. Data is the wealth. So you need to capture that and use it as you go along. You can share it with your partner. You can use it yourself. You can call the leads. You can send your teams to sell there, etc. So just keep in mind that whatever activity you do anywhere, and if you're doing it digitally, of course, you can have your, what you call it as bit.ly links. People can click on that link. People can come back to your site and go and understand your product or service. So all that becomes important. And there again, you capture their data as to who are the people who are clicking on your link. So every which way, anything that you do has to either get you sale or get you data or something, and therefore it's not a waste. So even if you compare it price versus your satisfaction or your result, it also could be not only sales, but all the other learnings, leads, etc., that you kind of collect. So I guess that was my last slide on awareness creation. I can go on and on because, as I said, I've been doing this in my corporate life and also now in this program. I've done it for so many years now. So there are so many details of how to go about it, where to select, which geography, which markets, what timings. All right, you have to look at seasonality. When people have incomes in rural India, when there is there's a crop cycle that you can follow. There is the seasonal cycle. There's the marriage cycles. I mean, there are so many things that one has to keep in mind and then design. So, especially if your means are limited when we start our ideas as a startup, I think that's really more important. And partnerships become important. I was just reading yesterday about 1MG, which is again an IFC investee company, and they are talking about so many partnerships that 1MG is doing now. They're trying to bank on the COVID demand for medicines and stuff related to healthcare. But what they're saying is that we are only doing partnership because we cannot alone do these kind of things. So you have that example of 1MG. Yesterday, again, day before, I'm sure some of you might have heard the takeover of Big Basket, sort of 68% by Tata's. So Tata is now going to own Big Basket in a majority way. So these are all very good signs for this world that we are in now. And we have to aim towards that. But these are the things that you see now on the screen. These are the kind of hard work that go into it. It's not built in a day, right? Yeah.
Praveen, we have a couple of more questions. Should we take them up at this stage?
Yeah, sure.
All right, great. Many startups need to do concept selling, not just a new product, but a new product category. And rural communities are risk averse. How do we navigate this space?
Right. So what we did also was, when we were trying to get feedback about new products, it could be any category. For example, I'm now mentioning one category, which is, let's say, solar lighting. It could be anything. It could be an agri tool or whatever. So the best way to do is you do focus groups, right? I'm sure you must have heard of focus groups. So focus groups are a good way of getting into, and we did it, I think 2-3 years back. It was you can do it through your teams if teams are larger, or you can do it through a research agency or whatever. Not very high cost, I must say. It depends on how much area you're covering. So define your geography, choose a target area, go and do focus group interviews, talk to people, and it's as good as, you don't need to, and you get a good reply to your concept or product, or if it's a physical, non-physical, doesn't matter. I think that's a good way of going.
All right. One more. Most of the time, the users of appliances or services, uh, uh, most of the time, the users of of appliances and services are not the decision maker in the matter of purchase. So, how can we keep account of it while designing marketing activities?
See, your design of the marketing activity has to be on the what we call it, the key decision maker, right? So for example, the key decision maker, and there are ways of reaching it. Now, who can be the key decision maker? Is the key earning member, the primary earning member of that family, for example, or it could be the woman of that house, or it could be children. So if you see in the urban market, what is happening today, why are all the washing powder ads talking to children and women? I mean, children are not buying the surfs and the excels of the world. But what I'm trying to say is that, for example, in rural markets, a lot of decisions are taken by women today, and also by, of course, men of the households are anyways the key primary bread earners, so they do decide. So what you should do is probably to keep your target audience in mind to whom you want to talk. So, for example, if this is the BTL campaign that you see on the photograph here, it was talking to the main bread earner who was coming to the van to talk about the product. But there were ways to go. So we used to always go to the, as I said, the women Asha health workers, right, as they are called, and through them you go to the houses and talk to the women. Children, of course, used to come, and you can see children also sitting here. So there are ways of reaching all kinds of segments. It's not difficult at all today. And rural India, believe you me, for all those who have not really been marketing or selling products or being there in those markets, they are more open than even your urban counterparts. So it's you can design it to the key decision maker and go for it. Whether it's a woman or a man, doesn't matter.
All right. The next question, can you run us through a typical distributor terms? For example, say a solar pump market, what would the commission rate be, payment terms? Should the payment terms be based on target or unit per unit commission? Anything else that I might have missed out?
So I'll take this up in the next segment because that's about distribution. And I'll keep this in mind. I'll answer this question when I come.
All right. I can repeat the question then. And the last question that we have for this segment is, what do you think about the involvement of fertilizer dealers in rural areas with agri-tech startups who are trying to engage with farmers? Because these retailers are closest to the farmers and provide credit support when selling inputs.
Excellent. I mean, that's excellent. I mean, I don't know whether you all have seen this news flash somewhere that it's IFCO, I think, that organization, that's one of the largest kind of players now there, right? So any partner that you gain, for example, if you're talking about agri-tech, I mean, the fertilizer or any kind of agri-tool, I mean, we have had solar products being sold through agri-tool sellers out there in the village areas because they are the largest. And as you said, and one of the questions that we talked about earlier was the key opinion leader. So one of your larger retailers is actually the key opinion leader. They are the people who give loans to farmers during the stressful times, right? I mean, we know how much a formal loan is going to the market, to the farmers. It's hardly anything. The formal loan from the banks that's going to the farmers is not at all suitable, and that also is going just for the working capital requirement through the Kisan credit cards, right? So these are the people to go to. I would always suggest, and as I said earlier also, partnerships are great, and partnerships with people who are there last mile is, and if you can really do it, I mean, it's not easy. It's easier said than done, but great. So fertilizer, agri-tech, all great. I mean, and they're the right partners to go to. Okay.
That's it.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's one distribution question which I'll answer for sure. And so distribution now, the most difficult, although it's my kind of pet subject. I was heading businesses, but I started with distribution initially. So this is something that I have played around for all my life with. Push versus pull. So the biggest question you start with is if you whether it's an agri tool, an agri concept, it's a financial product, or whether it's a clean energy product, new or old, whatever. There's a great difficulty in pushing products because it's not out there. You have not advertised for it. People don't know about it. People might need it, but they don't know. And you're not the apples of the world that you can say that, okay, I know what the people want. I'll create it for them and I'll market it and I'll sell it, and you become billions of dollars worth of company. So there is this difficulty in trying to make people understand that, look, hey, here I've got a great product which is good for you. So it is still a very much a push market when you start up, and therefore it requires a lot of distribution patience and strength to go out and be there. Infancy of brands, and I have been criticizing some of the players in this segments of clean energy, not so much in agri. I have not worked as of now. I've just started some basic work, but on the clean energy, on the solar energy side, on the product side, there are companies which have worked for quite some time, should have uh, been building or have built a smaller brand at least with recognition till so far, but they have not. Now that's a big folly, because that clearly diminishes your hard work to a great extent. Right? If they start knowing about you, then it's much easier to sell. Current low sales volume are not enticing enough. So here I can quickly answer that question about distribution margin, etc., for the solar water pump that we were talking about. See, I mean, what happens is that if your current volumes are low, your margins that you would need to share will be much higher, right? So overall, typically, I mean, I can't really talk about solar pumps, pardon me, just standalone. But typically, what happens in this, if you have a 3-layer distribution structure where you're talking from a company point to the distributor, and distributor, retailer, and retailer to a consumer, typically it could range anywhere between 20-25% for a branded fast selling product to 50% and above for slower and lesser known brands, and slower moving products. So it's all about the velocity. Now velocity could increase because of the margin that you pay, or it could be because of the brand pool that you have, or the strength of the product category that you have. So if it is not, then typically, for example, a distributor in rural area, if you have to reach, you can't probably reach directly a rural, let's say a distributor sitting in somewhere near Chittadurga in Karnataka, or somewhere near Salem in Tamil Nadu, or somewhere in Madhubani in Bihar. So then you need to reach to a player who's sitting in the capital city or a larger town of the district, right? So therefore you have to, even if that's just a kind of a forwarding guy, you'd still pay him about 4 to 5%. Then you go to the actual distributor who is sitting in those A, B, C, three, not A, B, C, but actually D, E kind of towns. That would typically take away from you anything between 10 to 15%. Again, I'm saying these are all ballpark numbers based on your brand strength, your product strength, etc. And then finally, you have the retailer who, for FMCG products, typically could take only about 5 to 10%, but it could go up to 20%, 30% margins plus schemes for whatever. So typically, I would say to start with, if you benchmark around something between 30 to 35% and above, as much as your kind of your business economics allows you, is safe to keep it as kind of a buffer that you should have. And all put in from your what you call the BOM cost, or when you're talking about cost of goods, kind of landed cost at your warehouse or whatever, then of course you have to completely sort of double the price. So if you're getting a product, let's say at 500, importing from China or making it here somewhere, and it's landing for you, it's about 500 rupees, you can keep a total of about 1,000 rupees when it reaches MRP, right? Because it takes care of your profitability, the entire margin structure in between, the logistics cost, because there is primary freight, there is secondary freight, there could be tertiary freight. So there's a whole lot of things. And of course, I mean, we have not even started talking about brand building and awareness creation, etc. So yeah, so that's the kind of margins I would put a ballpark figure at. And I hope that answers some of your questions. I think we need a much longer session to just talk about margins, but that's it for now. Low purchasing power of customers. When you're talking about BC category towns, it's very difficult to sell, because as I said, typically ballpark again, a month to 2 month earnings. For example, if I earn, let's say, 2,000 rupees a month in my village, then up to maybe 2,000 to 4,000 is something which I can look at in spending on a consumer durable. I'm talking about durable here. I mean, a big tool for agriculture or something like that. And again, it will depend on the category we are talking about. Agriculture, if it could become a necessity, then they could pay more. But if it's not a necessity, is a lamp which they can do without a solar lamp, then probably they can delay it, etc., etc. Absence of standardized quality. So as I said, for the program, the Studio program, there was this whole standardization which was done first, because there could not be products which were sold out or were advertised about or awareness created about, which failed. And this happened earlier, and therefore it lost faith of a lot of channels like the MFIs who are selling a large quantity of these kind of products. So standardization was must, and therefore we had these lighting global standards which these companies passed through, and therefore the products were brought in. So I think that really becomes important for agri tools, for agri tech companies, for tech companies. I mean, there are still tools out there. You have to try and connect to people who are offering these. Try and make your product or service something which has got a kind of a trademark, or kind of some kind of endorsement from somewhere, and that makes your job much easier. In the distribution question, again, as I said, this is a very vast topic. It's not possible at all to cover in 15, 20 minutes. I'll quickly just read out a few things. There are these challenges of cost. There is the challenge of logistics and ecosystem. Cost, why? Because it's a very scattered, vast market. Logistics and ecosystem, because there are these challenges of going into these difficult terrains, hilly terrains, jungle terrains, muddy terrains. Product quality, innovation, we just talked about. Standards are very important. So you have to try and get your product or service endorsed. Finance, of course, becomes important. I will quickly, just for 30 seconds, touch upon consumer financing, because that you must have heard through other speakers probably in other sessions. But this really becomes important. In fact, two questions are begging to get answered even today as we speak, in this entire world of clean energy, agri-tech you call it, or agri-finance, or startup culture, whatever you want to call it. Consumer financing is must. When people have to buy products which are really more than what they can actually afford today, then you need to have that last mile consumer financing. And that really helped the distribution of solar lights, for example, because of the MFIs coming in. They became a channel both for distribution as well as for consumer end financing. So that really becomes important. Of course, information and communication technology is today much better than it was 3, 4, 5, 7 years back. But even then, as I said, if 300 million people are using internet, that still means that we are talking a large number of people who are not. So that also is a challenge. Some of the things that you see listed down here basically are the kind of, I'm talking about what are the various ways of doing it. There could be a third party distributor model. So basically what you do is you catch some existing companies out there in rural India, you partner with them. There could be a direct distributor model, which all the large companies have, a Godrej or a Tata or a Unilever have. They have their own distributor setup. They have their own teams managing them. You can have a large corporate in-house channel. So for example, you can go and tie up with, for example, it could be both ways. For example, for Unilever, for its Pureit brand of water purifiers, they used to tie up with other companies who are there in the rural markets, or other companies tie up with, let's say, Mahindra tractors, which is there in the rural markets. Can we sell through their outlets? MFI channel I just spoke about is a very large channel. It was very, very strong for the solar category and for so many other products, which they think is good for the society. So they won't sell products which are just entertainment, etc. Otherwise, they do that. The micro enterprise channel. So there are these smaller firms and smaller enterprises whom you can tie up because they have outlets there. There are the rural retail chains, more hype than of actual benefit. So there are these e-chopals, etc., that you must have heard of. And alternate experiments in channel. There were people and there are companies who have tried channels, for example, of the gas cylinders, right? Those companies which distribute gas cylinders to households. I remember I was working for a company long back, which was selling packaged chicken, right? So it was chilled packed chicken that was being sold, and we that time tied up with these guys who push these carts and deliver these cylinders to houses, and we try and sell chicken through them. So it can all happen out there, and there are very successful ways of doing things. So these are some of the examples that I want to share with you. I think this is the final one. The master, of course, we consider C.K. Prahlad as one of the masters of this rural marketing and the selling to the bottom, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. He gives a lot of examples. If you have the time, if you haven't gone through this book or so many other books like these, which talks about so many examples. I've just mentioned a few from that book. The Casas Bahia example from Brazil, the Cimex of Mexico, and the Grameen Bank, of course, Bangladesh, is a great example of how they went to the last mile. Hindustan Lever does a lot of this work through their women, what they call as the Shakti Ammas. Nirma has tried this. I know of some models that I worked with when I was with Tatas. I used to I spend a lot of time trying to work with the Tata Tea Gaon Chalo model, and tie up with the rural market there. You can work with you can work with NGOs, etc. There's the examples of Indian Tobacco Company, and of course mobile operators, and people have tried to work with them to try and use their channels. So yeah, so I think this in brief, this we are being unfair to each other. I'm sure we can talk a lot about this, but time is a constraint. So that's what I kind of end my session today, the master class or the storytelling that I would like to call it.
Praveen, we have two more questions
Sure,
for the last
quickly.
session.
Yeah.
Last section, sorry. All right. So sometimes rural customers pay more than customers in urban areas for a particular product or solution. Do you think going forward with more digital adoption, this difference might go away?
I mean, yeah, it's the price is also a matter of convenience, right? I mean,
Yes.
this digitally it will go away to some extent for some kind of services, right? But it won't go away for everything. I mean, if there is a physical product which has to deliver, it will still cost money. But then, as you have seen in the markets, we all know about the market of these shampoo sachets and stuff, right? Which was started by a really small company in South India, and then it became so big. So, and these kind of things are there. So there is way of going around it. But for physical products, I would think it will take a very, very long time unless there are these strong partnerships, which actually means cost sharing and therefore reducing the cost.
All right. And the last question for today, which would be the right type of financial partner to reach out for consumer financing of solar home lighting and productive usage appliances?
As I said, MFIs have already been tried and tested, and for so many years now, all through the globe. I mean, in Africa, there are a lot of these MFIs doing this. In Asia, of course, there are so many of them. So, we have examples of our own from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from India. India, of course, it's a huge channel. As I said, it serves both purposes. It serves the purpose of MFIs. This serves the purpose of distribution as well as the purpose of last mile financing, consumer financing. But you have to keep in mind that when you're talking about productive appliances or solar home systems, there is a cap which has to be there. So, for example, these kind of MFIs will probably be happy with something which is between ticket size of 2 to 5,000 rupees, right? As soon as you reach 10,000 plus 20,000, then probably MFIs are not the right channels for the last mile consumer financing. Then you have to go to the small banks, for example. So there are so many small banks right now, right? We have so many examples of actually banks which are doing really well. So you have the AU banks of the world. So you have to go to small banks when you are trying to go to for last mile financing for consumer durables, solar home systems, etc., which are something like anything above 5,000 7,000 rupees when you start crossing 10,000 20,000 kind of marks.
All right. That's it. That was the last question.
So thank you
Any
so
closing
much.
comments?
No, I mean, I thank all of you whoever listened to this masterclass, and I'd love to share the experience. And just final one comment that there are so many of these efforts to try and help out this segment, I would say, of entrepreneurs which are doing some great work out there. So there is, for example, there is this Social Alpha, which is a Tata Trust initiative, which is doing this techno tech, right? They're doing this innovation challenge, and I've got some details of it, which I can probably, I don't know, share with some of you who are interested and reach out later. And here is kind of the coordinates to sort of, so p.kumar@gogla.org is my contact, but I'm just mentioning it to you so you can even find out for yourself. So the Social Alpha, for example, the Techno Challenge, which is on innovation on energy side, is a good thing to sort of be part of. And these are sort of the platforms which are being made available. So go out, use all of them, and all the best to all of you, and God bless. Thank you so much.
A big thank you, Praveen, for a very insightful session. It was such a delight to be a part of it, and we were truly lucky to gain from your experience. Coming up next is our last session of the day, Navigating Fundraising in Uncertain Times, hosted by Mr. Francois of Palladium Impact Capital. You definitely don't want to miss this one, so we'll see you there at 8:30. In the meanwhile, if you would like to chat about healthcare with veterans in the space, please head over to our networking lounge at 8:15, which is in less than 10 minutes. Anshul from UBS Optimus Foundation and Anusha from Wilgro's Healthcare Practice are waiting to speak to you.